Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I can see that we have participants joining today with us from around the world. So I'm just going to kickstart the sessions, or even though there are still, new attendees joining. So my name is Danny, and I'm the founder and CEO of Nexus FrontierTech. Together with me, I have my co-founders, Mark Esposito and Terence Tse. Today, we're in three different locations, and that's basically how the company was founded. Basically, the company was founded by a team of, or by a group of researchers, university researchers in both technical as well as thought leadership. And not only we have been researching in the latest AI technologies, but we have always been putting ourselves at the forefront of thought leadership, which means that is where Mark and Terence specialize in. So we're not just building the latest algorithm, we are also considering different aspects of the implementation, whether it's from governance point of view, whether it's from a user perspective point of view. And that's what we plan to discuss today. So before I begin, I would like to invite Mark and Terence to introduce themselves, although a lot of you may already know them. So Mark, please.
Sure. Well, thank you for the introduction. It's kind of nice that after so many years, we can still do this under the umbrella of Nexus, that really what brought us together. So I'm Mark. I'm one of the co-founders of Nexus FrontierTech. Joined, as Danny said, to sort of like integrate from the technical more of the thought leadership. So I'm an academic in my primary work. And currently I do a lot of work on governance of technology. So I shifted over the years a little bit more towards policy. Part of my introduction, just to remind you that we, the three of us, have written a book 6 years ago called The AI Republic, that became a bestseller and textbook in many courses. And it kind of became a bit of the testament of what Nexus was doing in those years, which was prior to the AI breakthrough that we currently experience. And we are not far from releasing our second book together, which is hopefully coming towards the end of the year, where we have taken a bit more of a contemporary look at where our thinking has gone. And because we have kind of pioneered the mantra of AI native, in the title of the book, we do talk about what is an AI native trajectory. And that has also defined the second stage, I think, of maturity of Nexus, where today we do more than what we used to do when we started. So very nice to have you all. I see very familiar faces, actually not faces, but names in the list. And thank you for having followed our work for so many years. And over to you, Terence.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very, very much, Danny. It's a great pleasure to be here. Not least because one, as you said, Mark, there are so many familiar names. It's lovely to be able to connect with them again, and also there are some new I think there's some names that I'm not familiar with. Great that you can actually join us. Thank you very, very much. Just want to add to what Danny and Mark were saying earlier on. We strive to be at the forefront of technologies, and not only we are actually doing the talk, we are actually talking the talk as well. And so we are very happy that we will be releasing our book, putting a final touch right now on the manuscript. Hopefully that will come out at the end of the year. But funny, funny or not funny, depending on how you see it. No matter how fast you actually try to write the book with ChatGPT and other lovely LLM system, the technology is actually much faster than how we can write. So but as Mark was alluding to, so we are now probably standing at the cusp of new revolutions, new developments, new trajectories, and that is not least put forward by Agentic AI, which is probably something that we will talk about, which is not something that is new, but conceptually it is not. It is to me, at the very least, it is a natural development, of what we have been seeing, with the traditional and the Gen AI. So without further ado, I think we will go deeper into the subject. And once again, thank you very much for coming and coming to join us. Danny, back to you.
Great. Thank you very much. So what we'll do is that we will spend the next 20, 30 minutes to just share our views on what we do at Nexus, as well as what we are writing in a book. So it will be not technical. This session is not meant for technical people. It's a session to just basically share our experience and what do we think what is coming up. So to set the stage, I would probably present you a couple of slides, and then using those slides as a context, we will probably begin to have a sort of like a fireside chat between the three of us. And if you have any questions, please just raise your hand, ask the questions. We're happy to answer. All right. So basically, the context of or the topic of today's discussion is the beyond automation, AI agents at the core of financial transformation. That is what we do at Nexus FrontierTech, where we spend a lot of time working with large global banks around the world, and for the last couple of years. And I'm just trying to give you a bit of perspective. What does it mean by the terms of what Mark and Terence just mentioned a little bit about the AI native. So this is the major transformation, as you can see on the slide. This is the major transformation that's been happening in the last 40 years. From the PC era to the internet era, internet era, which means you are having a PC that is able to connect to the internet, but you're just able to actually just communicate from, one to one, for me sending an email to you, for you to respond an email to me. Not until we actually move to the mobile native era, where we bring the nature of the communications one step further, which means we can actually bring advice with us, and that advice is able to sense or to track where we are and when we perform a transaction, what I call a multi-way communications. And then I'm just going to split the cloud native, because this is more enterprise purpose, to what we are discussing about in the book. What is AI native? What is going to change in the years that are coming? And I'm not going to go into deep today. I'm just going to give you the context. As you can imagine, when we move from the PC era to the internet era, a lot of our behavior, the way how we perform our daily chores, our daily transactions, the way how an enterprise, how a business is running the business, they will totally change. The way how you use a website to basically how you use a brick and mortar to basically run a transaction, to how you use a computer to run a transaction, to how you actually build a mobile phone or mobile apps to run a transaction, to how we are seeing for the next AI era to come, are totally different. That's why businesses, especially in the financial world, needs to fundamentally change how they perceive the interactions to be. And sorry, just one second. So this is basically a simple two charts, a simplifying chart that, from my experience when we work with these financial services, how we see the traditional era coming from the software moment, that means from the PC era to the mobile era, where the transactions were being shortened by the traditional softwares, whether it's mobile apps or different types of softwares that were available. However, this is the fundamental issues when a lot of companies, when they're trying to implement their AI software and they fail, because the way how AI softwares are run are totally different. We're not trying to optimize the process or the time between different processes. What we're trying to do is with AI can actually validate and verify those information upfront or at the same time for various departments. This is a paradigm shift of how a business is serving the customers. And that's the reason why when you're trying to use the mentality of a traditional software to implement an AI software, most of them failed. And so, again, I'm just trying to set the stage for the discussion. My last slide is basically the topic for today, where the AI agents, which is the topic today, how we are seeing the AI agents is going to assist us, especially in the financial services. This is a chart prepared by Accenture back in a couple of years ago, about 2, 3 years ago, where you can see that the shift of the replacement of human role have slowly shifted from back office to front office, which means from a more repetitive task to a more cognitive task. And what it means that these are the terms that you hear today: AI agents, co-pilot, assisting you to actually work with each other together. That is the wish, that is the hope. So I'm just going to set a context here, and I'm going to throw the questions to Terence and Mark, and we can discuss whether is this graph correct, is this graph not correct, and what are the considerations that we have to make when we try to implement any of this software beyond just the software itself, beyond the AI itself. So yes, Mark or Terence, if you like to begin.
So then I can start sharing just a
Mm.
reflection on this, right? So one of the things that I guess we have understood as a bit of industry leaders, but also advocates outside of the company into either the classroom or training rooms, is that this sort of like revolution was happening at the same time as we were actually finding out the number of redundancies, hidden costs, inefficiency that we had in the workplace. One of the very first thing that I remember from when we were talking about one of our major clients, right, was how much time we were basically they were usually wasting in reading handwriting. And so over time, we started to discover that across the organizational flow charts, there's a lot of this inconsistency that are kind of legacy systems in which significant amounts of repetition were basically accrued. And so somehow technology has helped in, first of all, illuminating these blind spots that were coming from heritage systems, understanding that many of them, they were basically form of financial burdens. And I think naturally, when you have technology that can reduce those kind of loose strings, it becomes easier to go to a client and eventually show that technology becomes an easier way of automating decision that used to be designed back in the days when we didn't have the technology we have right now. So the reason why I wanted to share this is there's an historical evolution of where we are, mainly by the ability for us to recognize the inefficiency that were accumulated over time. So likely there were a convergence of factors that made it possible for us to see an acceleration. And the reason why I say this, and I pass over to you, Terence, is that this is not a new phenomenon. Technology has always been around, and we know AI has been around for decades. What really accelerated more than actually before, especially when we shifted from rule-based to basically learning, neuroscience, basically, it was the fact that we could apply this to a wider range of tasks that eventually became easy to address by integrating automation. I think this is a premise and a foundation that happened prior to the terminology of agency that nonetheless will help us in understanding why today, when we talk about co-pilot or agentic AI, it's just the next evolution of something that has started already at least 15 years ago from a corporate perspective. So Terence, your reflections on this?
I fully agree with you. Like the fact that like as I mentioned earlier on, right? Agentic AI is almost like a natural evolution, like reaching that phase. Like the reason is simple. So just to actually give you give you some thoughts, right? Last year I was given a speech on the stage, and at the same stage, the speech that came before or after me, I can't remember exactly, was someone who is the head of LLM at a big big tech company, And so he was actually presenting what Gen AI can actually do in the financial services space. And so I was like, oh, okay, this is good because I can actually go back and report to Danny and exchange notes with him, what exactly Gen AI could actually do. As it turned out, the only thing he was actually saying was the fact that Gen AI is going to increase productivity. And that's okay. We all know that a Gen AI can increase productivity, but exactly how? I never actually got my details. Now, I don't think I can actually blame him or the presentation. I think it's the nature of the technology. The fact that Gen AI is simply very it's good for interactions. It's it's very very good at behaving like humans. But the fact is this, if we were to look at what Danny was actually showing in the slides, right? Businesses are basically made up of workflows and processes. And if you simply have a Gen AI, you can't actually replace take over a workflow and a process based on a technology that can interact with people best, right? So what is therefore missing is therefore other capabilities. And I think to a large extent agentic AI, what we're seeing right now, Danny will probably be able to actually share more insight with us on how Nexus is doing it. But it's a combination of couple of things. One is how do we actually make the most use of the trial and tested machine learning technologies. Two, how do we actually make the best use of Gen AI? I remember, Danny, you were actually telling me that, one way, as it turned out in financial services, right? What everyone wants to use as the user interface is not any specifically designed user interface. It is Excel spreadsheet, because this is how one can actually cut and dice the data, build new models, build things on top of it easily, right? So and you were telling me that ultimately what are we doing is to use Gen AI to actually translate the output from the model as the backend, and convert it and put it as the put it on populate it on the spreadsheet, so that people can actually get on with the user interface that they're most familiar with, right? And so all I'm saying is, it's a combination of traditional ML, Gen AI, and also just as important, right, is how we actually rethink the workflows and the processes. But I think if you think about it, right, this is presumed pretty much what the current age AI agents is about. It is about how do we combine the different technologies from RAG to tapping a database, right? And using tools, tapping other softwares in order to achieve the goal of a very specific process. So
Yeah.
I think this is this is a natural progression. And the second thing I want to actually draw out, and I'll pass it back on to Danny, to you, is this. I think what we have seen, right, ever since the start of Nexus FrontierTech, what we have seen is we see technologies almost always started in the back end and gradually move from the back office to the front office, right? Like you were saying, using it for purpose of efficiency, and gradually over time use it for cognitive purposes. I would imagine, right? The way we are companies are using agentic AI. Certainly, how Nexus is using agentic AI would be starting with the back end, and probably over time companies will become a lot more courageous, have got a lot more experience to deploy the newer technologies for the customer facing side. So I
Yeah.
I'm in agreement with both of you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Mark and Terence. I think this is actually, I'm always amazed every time I go out and speak to more people, whether it's in the classroom or when I go out and speak to the clients. And I kept asking myself the same questions. Why? Why do people's perceptions so different in how they look at this technology compared to a software? It's pretty simple. You have a single input and you have a single output. I think the
Mm,
key lies in this augmentation. The word augmentation is basically, mimicking what we human beings are trying to do. But the key questions come is, Do we know? Do we know what we are trying to do? Nobody understands ourselves. Nobody understands other. This is absolutely cognitive and it's impossible to really augment when we don't even know what we are trying to achieve. And
Yep.
this is the key questions that I realized that when enterprise or CEOs trying to implement any AI projects, although they love all these terms, they love to going out to talk about this. There's a lot of different theories on how to apply, but I realized the key reason on why there are still very few AI projects are being implemented is because AI projects are not measurable. They are not quantifiable.
Yep.
And there's a very interesting phenomenon that I see, and from what Terence has said, is that you go out and talk to people about AI projects. It sounds so grand, it sounds so superficial. But when you look at those successful AI projects, what they are saying is just to remove the repetitive tasks. It suddenly goes back to narrow down to a very small, comparable to the benefits of software.
Yep.
Why? It's not. The key is simply we are trying to frame our mind using the software mind to put it into the AI mind, which is
Mm.
unmeasurable. And that's
Mm-hmm.
very difficult. So
Yep.
what I've been telling all these executives is that, you know, it's very easy. You, again, I don't have a calculations or formula to calculate what's the real benefit of AI.
Mm-hmm.
However, you can calculate your actual ROI right now by actually calculating how many hours, how much money that you save. But there's one thing that you are missing, which is AI software, because it's variable input with the single output, it is scalable. The way how I show you just now, or if I have time, I
Mm.
can show you a lot more example. This augmented continuous learning is the continuous learning loop to basically using machines to assist human to understand better, and then your feedback will improve the machine further. And this continuous learning scalable solutions is what people still don't know how to measure today. And that's the fear of in one hand, people don't know what's the real effect and what are the consequences of this continuous learning and improvement model. On the other hand, people are restricting their own mind by using the old software head to measure the success or the failure of the AI model. And that's a very big discrepancies in between these two. And I'll just put it back to you, Mark.
Adnan, I love what you said, and I see that some already is venturing into the Q&A, and nice to see your comment, Sylvie, and nice to see your comment, Amin. And Stephen, I will try to address a little bit the question on data as I like react to what Danny said. So sometimes when I do classes, I will always say AI is not scientific. Do not expect empirical data. And many people start shaking because they think that just because it's a technology that seems to be precise, it's enhancing the scientific data itself. And that's where Danny's argument is important to be understood. AI is an experimental technology that is designed to instigate hypothetical questions that tend to be tested with technology. This is why the fine-tuning generates these ongoing feedback loops. It's iterative, so it keeps on changing. As we understand the question that we're asking differently, we are inputting something that is different as well. The perfect example of that became very manifested is the moment that we started to understand prompting. If you notice that you never end as you started a prompt, there's always a lot of different steps from the time you start the prompt to the time you actually end the task. And that's because the question is not that the reason that the machine got better, is that you have understood how to interact with the reasoning that is not operating from a perspective of logic in the same way as we think in terms of science. It is iterative because it changes as multiple factors are basically being plugged in. So I think it's critical to change the language of AI. AI is not scientific or empirical, is hypothetical, experimental, is a form of extrapolation, is generating feedback loops. And that's why it is so difficult for people to really appreciate the value. because the quantification is where we tend to simplify this to something that, as Terence said before, nicely plug itself into the spreadsheet. The value of an AI enterprise is not measured easily only in one factor because you are integrating a multi-logic approach to basically how companies change. But what the technology does change is how we think. And this is one of the reasons why, since the very beginning, we never exchanged the question of humans and machine. I think it was over 10 years ago when we started to talk, and Nexus was kind of in the making. We were very, very clear that we had to advocate even more in terms of how vocal we wanted to be on the fact that we should never create an equalization between humans and machines. Now, this has not necessarily gone too well for many reasons. We continue to have wrong dichotomies or false dichotomy between humans and machine. But I think one of the things that we learn over time is that the more we talk about technology, the more introspective we talk about people. And to the point you were making, Stephen, on data, right? Data is critical, of course. There's a whole science about the fact that data needs to be coming from a point of representation, that you can trust the sourcing, that you have explainability. We equally been writing back in the days about the white box versus the black box, the fact that we want to have AI explainable. Interesting on that, data is only a part of the conversation, but it's not the end game. You cannot have AI without data, that's a fact, but data itself is simply one of the mechanisms that allows you to go into that degree of introspection that is really redefining the purpose of why you're using technology. How do you redefine a task? How do you redefine a job? And how do you actually start rethinking the agency that used to be implicit because we didn't have an alternative? Now we have technology that's powerful enough that is challenging the idea of co-piloting the agency together with humans. So the moment that you have in a challenging factor, you had to spend more time in defining what is humans in the loop. And that by itself is not just an easy definition. It requires a lot of work that is internal.
I'm going to add my technical perspective on this question and to complement what Mark has just explained as well. Actually, we haven't really thought about what AI is really good at. To be honest, from the days of early machine learning, deep learning days to the Gen AI days, AI has been very good in picking up data. That means AI has been very good in recognizing data, analyzing data, interpreting it, and then providing the output to put it into a loop of learning to provide us. From the days of recognizing our human faces to determine whether are you the right person, to today recognizing what you are asking as a prompt, and then trying to understand the context of your prompt to give you the right context of answer. So that is actually the most crucial in terms of the technical point of view, that AI is able to collect or to identify the right data in order to curate the right output. And this loop of collection and curation is a loop of ever expanding to understand or to put the context into a much better way. And this is a very interesting thing because a lot of the data today that we have in especially the enterprise world are still not explainable. They are still not analyzable because they are in PDF format. And what's the point of us having all these tens of thousands of PDF in our computer without able to actually use it to analyze as we wish? And that's the fascinating thing about LLM, that is able to actually, understand human language. That's why it calls as a large language models, understand human context from the way how we ask a question, the way how we are looking for an answer, to actually generate, to curate the prompt, the answers that we are looking for. So AI is not generating any new thing, but rather I would say the models are extremely or getting better in understand what we are trying to ask, what we're trying to do, and hence is generating the output that we wish to hear, we wish to have. And obviously, again, is an augmentation. So sometimes we don't even know what we want. Naturally, the AI models trying to augment what we do have the hallucinations in understanding what we want. So we are going from a static of understanding whether, is this Danny Gore as a human facial recognition, to trying to understand what Danny is trying to convey, trying to present. And that this evolution will just keep on moving and moving, because that's basically how human gets things done. Terence.
I want to actually add a couple of points to what you guys were actually saying. So first, I think there is a reasons why Copilot is becoming very popular. Even though time and time again I've been told by different people, Copilot is nowhere near as good as ChatGPT. I don't know, right? I don't use the Copilot, but I start to ask myself the questions: if Copilot is indeed, inferior to ChatGPT, why are so many companies using it? And I think one reason is simple, because it is relatively free in quotation mark, because it comes with Microsoft Office. And if you're a company and you want to actually introduce productivity, right? How do you measure the ROI of productivity? Someone who is actually going to leave at 4 p.m. instead of leaving at 6 p.m. In the eyes of any company, that's not productivity gain, right? So how do you measure it? And I think the best way to the easiest way to achieve ROI is to use something that is free, right? Because the ROI will almost always be positive. So so I think there's a reasons why Copilot is popular. It's simply because it's very, like you said, very, very difficult to measure, the return. And as I always said in class, right, as a finance professor, I always say, if you are implementing any technologies, not just like a AI, right, you should actually do it with for cost savings rather than revenue enhancement. Because revenue enhancement is very difficult to measure. Cost savings a lot easier. Like you were saying, how many hours saved? How many full-time employee salaries you can actually cut, right? So it is hard for companies not to actually think about how to quantify the output, because they throw in actual money, but you can't simply just say the output is non-money, non-monetary. It's a hard sell. Going back to the point of data, right? I think I think the key here is that I think when we're writing the book, one thing that we actually found was that most of the companies, when you ask them what are the things that you are most ready when it comes to within a business, when it comes to taking on AI. So there will be a data, the IT system, the executive teams, the organization, the talent, what are the things that you believe you are the most ready when it comes to that. And most company, the most common response was, as you can guess, data. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One is data has been a subject that is being talked about for the past, 10, 20 years. I remember we started with big data, and because data is such an important thing. And two, I think just as important is the fact that data is specific, is actually concrete, not the data itself, but the fact that if you were to actually engage on a project to clean up the data, to build a database, to actually structure the data, that in itself, one can actually make an argument for, at least, when it comes to looking at through the lens of ROI, right? So companies are getting a lot more ready when it comes to data, but the least ready of all companies, drumroll, of course, is talent. So I think, going forward, right, what we're starting to see is, we are going to see humans playing a much bigger role, when it comes to, organizations, companies taking on on AI. And I believe that, even with the agentic AI, there is always a media always actually love to focus on the shiny parts of things. And they will be saying that, oh, you know what, agentic AI, they're going to take away a lot of people's job. Maybe that's the case, but this does not actually debase the value of humans in the entire organization. I
Actually,
don't believe that, right?
that's a very interesting. In the last 1 week, I've been testing a very famous AI agent called Manus AI.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure any of you have heard of it. Some
Yeah,
a very famous,
yeah,
probably is marketing propaganda from China.
yeah.
An AI agent that has raised hundreds of millions of dollars. And I've been playing around with it. I'm trying to compare what's the difference between Manus AI and OpenAI, because they charge 10 times more. In order to do the same task, they charge $200 a month, whereas OpenAI is just $20 a month. So it's open access to everybody. And I was having struggle to find the real difference. I was having struggle, and I kept asking myself why. What are I'm not going to the technical here. What are the differences between these two? But in order to also answer some questions from Amin about the AI agents and bringing what Terence have just said, is that human beings, we are a structured animal. We need to be in structured format in order to perform our job.
Yep.
When we are given and open a piece of white paper, we don't know where to begin. Whether you give it to an intern or whether you give it to a CEO. Of course, there are differences, but they are about the same. It's very, very difficult. And this is especially critical when you put into the financial services industry, because financial services industry requires precise decision making. The comma of on a zero, whether it's 100 or 1,000, makes a huge difference. Therefore, the successful use cases that we have seen are not, whether whatever LLM that we use, whether it's an AI agent, whether it's an LLM, the successful cases are all still coming from successful user interface, because you are structuring the output for people to be able to make a decision, especially in financial services. Now, the UI of it is very different. Remember the two charts that I showed to you, where the traditional AI is on a horizontal, whereas in AI world, AI native world is vertical. That is the difference, because right now you're not actually, having a CRM, a Salesforce CRM. You enter the data and you generate an output. You are not. You are just given a database, and the database is just filled with data, structured data that is already analyzed, showing in graph and analysis that allow you to make a decision. And that is, in a way, I'm trying to answer several questions together on how we see those successful implementation have been performed.
So
Okay.
then I'm gonna see. There's a question that Amin is asking about the government's part, and maybe I can try to provide you that answer, Amin. But it's also kind of extending on what Dennis said before. So let's imagine that agentic AI is the agency of prompting that we don't do anymore, but is now automated. So rather than prompting, you can automate the prompting by making that agentic in itself. That will be okay if, for example, you are retrieving information that are, for example, becoming a memo or a document, right? This is one of the reasons why we tend to be really happy with our companions AI from Zoom or from other tools. And we actually find it to be quite precise, because somehow there's no decision-making process to be made. There's only summary or synthesis. And in this specific case, you can argue that this has facilitated a lot of processes to become optimized. Still, the moment you have a summary of notes that are coming from a conversation, the decision doesn't come in an agentic form. It has to be delegated to people. So I think it's a clear space on identifying how critical the tasks are and whether or not they are tasks that require an oversight or tasks that are somehow in favor of being automated. One of the things that I tend to say a lot during the classroom is, like, if you're dealing with something very tactical that is an information that anybody with the same access would have, this is a perfect place for automation. The moment you start increasing the stance of critical that requires interpretation, that's when sometimes you get to see these agentic models that are difficult to be implemented at scale. Governments, as you can understand on the question you asked, Emin, they struggle with this even more because imagine no government develop their own softwares. They all have to rely on third parties, and they try to engage in conversation about the digital sovereignty of the data, which is a critical part for them. So very likely you'll see that government will have some applications. Many of them, they tend to be into the digital public infrastructure in e-services, but they are equally bounded, right, by what likely would be the safeguards that governments are going to put forward. So it's still a very, I think, early stage adoption at this point in time. It is okay for areas of government services that have been digitized, and the real value is not the agentic per se, is the fact that you are transforming a series of tasks that used to be analogic into digital. By itself is already quite of a breakthrough. Likely, as government keep on improving their own competence on the field, and they are acquiring what the private sector has been doing for longer, we're likely going to see government that are going to be more experimental and using technology also for sandboxing, which only few parts of the world currently do. So I just wanted to make sure that I plot the conversation as you brought it up. And Terence, I'll let
But
you
usually,
and from here.
usually governments are a lot slower, right, when it comes to taking on technologies, right? It's, I guess, it's because like, it's taxpayers' money. Um, there is like a lot of the time a lack of talent. They simply cannot pay the same salaries as as corporate. So I think like in general is a lot slower. But my take, on the like agentic AI is is basically the following. I think like the problem we have these days is we tend to see the words like because we know like what like agentic AI is and everyone is talking about it. We tend to actually go to those media that we will actually reinforce the fact that agentic AI is everywhere. But as like Danny was saying up front, right? The adoption of like AI in companies are extremely slow, right? It is at least like a slower than we would like as a vendor of AI. And we're not talking about agentic AI. We are basically talking about even the most traditional form of AI. There are very few AI projects, right? Executives are still, a lot of them are still struggling as to how fast or whether like how big they should be moving when it comes to the AI like AI. So so agentic AI, I believe, it is going to take some time for it to get down to the level where companies will be comfortable in using it. Having said that, there's a questions that just popped up, right? How AI is being used in finance to strengthen compliance, and I think this is basically like what like this is a very good example. Of course, I'll let Danny talk about it because Danny is going to like basically be able to actually talk about it for an hour. But the idea is simple, right? Is that when it comes to compliance, compliance is, at least for us at Nexus, was a sweet spot, simply because compliance is a task that is very, very well defined. We know exactly what the output it should be, and it is, like you were saying, like a fraud with human errors, right? These are and the variation of the results, is basically there is none, right? Either you actually read the data like a material, read the extract the data and read the data correctly or not. So these are the prime estate when it comes to applying AI. Danny, I feel like you are the one who
I,
has got tons of experience in this.
I'm just going to answer since Terence has already answered. I'm just going to answer in a simpler, from my perspective, slightly more technical, is that we human beings, we cannot take abstract things well.
Yeah.
We simply don't do well with abstract things, and that's where the fear came from. When we're given a chat box, we're given a box of chat, and you can type anything and you can get anything. That anything is the source of the fear. We need a concrete tool, a concrete interface to actually apply into all of these divisions, different for different usage, whether it's for compliance, whether it's for onboarding, whether it's for, or for processing. To be honest, the data that is used in all these different processes are the same. You get your bank statements, you get your passports, driver's license during the onboarding. You need it for the processing, for lending, for credit cards, for stocks, for brokerage, onboarding, for due diligence, for compliance. You need the same data for every of these process. But the only difference is the interface are different. And the interface are built for different users. You have the compliance personnel. They will only come from their perspective because the objective is to check, is there any fraud? You have the onboarding, the salespeople. Their objective is to process these files in a faster way so that you can actually being onboarded and bring sales to the company. The only difference is how we see things. We need a proper interface to allow us to understand, to believe, and to feel safe about it. And Mark, yeah.
Danny, I'm gonna maybe, as I know we're not far from wrapping up, and there's a point, Sylvie, you're asking, and I think it's not about necessarily Canada or the US. I think it's widely spread as a conversation, right?
Yeah.
At the very moment, the number of people who know how to use generative AI is just a fraction. We were talking about literally a non-representative sample. There's a significant number of people there having an uptake of trying this out. The fact that you could have a conversation about Copilot versus Claude versus ChatGPT, and now it's becoming a conversational topic. But the real diligence that is required to acquire what you call in your question literacy is far from being there. And I mentioned this in another conversation. It's coming from Ethan Mollick, that you know is a quite the vocal scholar in AI, where he's making the comparison about what is the average number of hours required for us to learn how to drive in our lifetime. And the number of hours that are required for us to learn how to drive is estimating about 25 continuous learning hours, right? And the estimate of generative AI is over 100, meaning 4 times the effort required for us of how we learn how to drive. And I think this is where it's largely undercapitalized. Sometimes we think that it's just like a search engine. We're not dealing with a search engine here because the search engine was kind of a relatively one-way road, right? You were typing a search engine, you were getting the results. And the question would be, can I trust it? Where do I go? Which one do I want to go? Can I pay for a higher position in the ranking? Here is an entirely different kind of iteration that you need to build with a machine. One of the things that Terence and I, we were part of a project for a large client where we have learned that the reasoning of a large language model cannot be necessarily converted easily into the reasoning of what happens in a conversation with people. We tend to be comfortable with nuances. We don't have to be over explicit in what is basically conform terminology. We don't necessarily mind having multiple concepts that are represented at the same time because we think in terms of interoperable structures. Technology requires an entirely different approach. It's like learning statistics or learning any new language. You can't assume that the way you learn a language will be exactly the same just by converting or translating exactly through a prompt. And I think this space of learning is where a lot of opportunity currently are existing. We all play a role. We play this in the context of a formal educational journey, like a classroom. We do this with one of our venture, which is the AI Native Foundation, where we are truly trying to bring forward, right, training and opportunity for people to get this dissemination of knowledge on AI. We do this when we have a conversation with client or demos. It's really about becoming a much wider spectrum of reference, but we're still very, very far from where we should be in terms of literacy, and likely it will improve. But it's not that it goes as fast as the pace of development of the technology we see. There's a clear asymmetry between the technology.
I'll add one more point, Mark, very quickly.
Yes.
Right? What you just said reminded me of how to actually operate a VCR, the video cassette recorder, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, probably I'm the only person who remembers these things. But when it comes to using like a VCR, right, the only thing people care about is whether the VCR can actually play the video cassette, right? How many people actually go and pick up the manual to actually learn how to use the timer, how to actually do a specific recordings, how to actually all the special features. Nobody nobody would actually spend the time to actually do it. Now, maybe it is out of necessity, out of unnecessity, but the fact is this: I think we humans are happy, with basically seeing a technology that serves our main purpose. So going back to what you were saying, right, is I think a lot of people basically they just start to prompt and then they're getting the result regardless of how good or bad the result is, they just stop there. So in other words, right, it's exactly like English, right? It's very easy to learn, but very, very difficult to master. You need 99 extra hours in order to actually really being able to master ChatGPT. But unfortunately, a lot of us only spend 1 hour on it, because the 1 hour, as you can imagine, get us the most mileage, or get us the mileage that many people are just looking for, right? The results that people are looking for. So it's I think in terms of literacy, I think that's where we need a lot more work, in order to get people to actually go further out to do it.
Yeah, I think what Terence and Mark have just said is from not only from the literacy point of view, but from the technology's point of view, really, human beings need a real things in front of them in order to actually be able to understand. I'm just going to pick up the last question from John
Yep.
David. Is there a specific framework or roadmap that would suggest? Yes, definitely. Think of data as every business or everything that you do, every person and every business, we have our unique competitive advantage. I would say, let's say, take a restaurant, for example. A successful restaurant definitely have one or two unique dishes that sells better than others. And take that as your data point. You do this better than others. And the key question is, how do you actually put it into a scalable, not only, you don't only have one chef to cook the dishes for others. You are trying to now make it a lot more. You're trying to actually productionize it and then, get the feedback back. So if you think of this unique dish as a data point that you own very uniquely, and how to actually scale or improve from there, that is basically what we put it in our book, the double loop harvesting, data harvesting, to basically allow you to use your existing advantage to put it into an AI model, to train the AI model to improve you better. And then from there, to find more and more competitive advantage to build your defensiveness or your defensibility of your business. So that is what I always encourage a business. Before you implement any AI project, build a strategy plan. Build a strategy plan that is in recurring and scalable. Then only you will know what type of data point you're trying to get, what type of AI models you are trying to build. And I think we are at about time, but maybe, Mark, Terence, it would be great to have you as one last closing, a couple of minutes from 1 2 minutes from each of you to have the closing for today's session.
So then I'm gonna do, if I can, put something in the chat. This is our next book. It's gonna be properly announced. So once we have all the elements of the release date, we can share with you the cover. But this is where we have taken our thinking after a significant journey that we had done with the Nexus 1.0 that really became a place where almost like a garden for us, right? A place where we really grew our own understanding and also our limitation in understanding that this was much bigger than just the technology checkpoints that you acquire and then you are actually fluent, right? It has been a journey where we never could really settle, right? By saying now we know it. So our expertise happened also by being largely confronted by the fact that we had to adapt very quickly, both from an industry perspective to the fact that the industry was changing and sometimes it's different from what you think. But equally how we were able to bring it across the fact that we all bring something very different to the table, and how this became the sort of like convergence of our culture. So we invite you, as we are kind of not far from basically submitting the manuscript for us to initiate the production, to stay tuned and follow the work that we're doing. We appreciate that many of you keep on following us for many years, and beside what we do, maybe in our everyday life, Nexus has been for us, especially in the case of Terence and I, where this is not our everyday job, has been the most important project that we have been able to be part of, and really appreciate the fact that you have been part of this webinar with us. So really thankful for having had this conversation among the three of us, and also with the question you instigated. Terence.
I think I'll keep it very short. I think from this point on, with the developments are going to be very, very interesting in two ways. One is how the mix mash of different types of AI technologies, from AI agents to Gen AI to traditional AI. What are the right combinations that companies will be using going forward? That's an interesting question for me. The second question, I want to leave it with everyone is, how are the societies going to change? How are social lives going to change? How are our personal lives going to be impacted by all this? I don't mean by, just using ChatGPT to actually do assignments, right? Or write essays. It is all about, how are products going to change? How are the apps on the phone going to be very, very different if it were AI powered, right? What are the, how intimate would AI be, when it comes to knowing what we want? I think it's going to be fascinating from this point onwards, when it comes to development, new products, new ideas, provided that we don't destroy the world before that, right? So anyway, I'm gonna actually hand it back to Danny.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to do the closing. Really, thanks everyone for attending this session. We have been talking about this, the three of us, on the same session for the last, 6 years.
Longer.
And we never really made it. But we hope that this is not the last. This is just the first of many to come, where especially when we launch our new book, we'll be having more and more sessions like this. Well, please feel free to connect us on LinkedIn. Many of you are already connected with Mark and Terence, and you can find me through them, as the three of us always do a lot of activities together. If you have any further questions, please feel free to ask us on LinkedIn as well. We're more than happy to answer you. And lastly, is that the three of us probably travel to more countries than anyone combined together in a year. I was just calculating the other day, our travel map. The three of us travel to almost 60 over countries a year, more than 100 cities combined together.
Wow.
So please, as long as we always post it whenever we are, if we are in your cities, let us know. We're happy to actually pick up a drink with you. All right. Thank you very much. I think we're doing very
Thank you very much, everyone.
time management.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Danny. Thank you very much, Mark.
Guys.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Good to see you guys. To the next one in another city.
Thank you.
Take care,
Bye.
guys. Thank you very much. All the very best.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.